Marta and Samuel, an elegant black couple, went to a renowned restaurant to celebrate a special anniversary. Upon arrival, they were treated with disdain and humiliation by Felipe, an arrogant and prejudiced waiter who judged them solely by their appearance. However, Felipe, the waiter, did not know who the couple he mistreated truly was. Marta adjusted her elegant grey coat as she entered the restaurant, feeling the gazes fall upon her and Samuel. He held her hand firmly, and the black suit he wore seemed to reflect the glow of the sophisticated lights in the place. They both had the confident posture of those who knew they belonged anywhere, but the tension in the air was almost palpable. The restaurant was packed, well-dressed clients conversing in hushed tones, while waiters moved swiftly between the tables. Marta and Samuel walked to the reception desk, where Felipe, in his impeccable uniform and rehearsed smile, greeted them. "Good evening. We would like a table for two, by the window, if possible," said Marta in a gentle yet assertive tone. Felipe examined them from head to toe, his expression shifting to something more condescending. "By the window? We don't have tables available there right now. Perhaps you'd prefer something more private." Marta raised an eyebrow, but Samuel simply smiled. "Whatever you have available, as long as we can have a quiet dinner." Felipe nodded but took a long time to return. When he finally led them, he took them to a table in the corner, near the kitchen, where the sound of slamming doors and clattering dishes was continuous. "Here is perfect for you," he said, with a smile that seemed more mocking than polite. Samuel pulled the chair out for Marta before sitting down, ignoring the obvious attempt at humiliation. When Felipe handed over the menus, his voice carried a tone of provocation. "I hope you find something that fits your taste." Marta looked at Samuel, who remained calm, but she felt the discomfort growing. Throughout dinner, the taunts continued. Felipe was slow to bring their orders and served other customers before returning to their table. When he finally brought the wine, he spilled some on the table before filling the glasses. "Oops, sorry. It happens." Marta took a deep breath but decided not to respond. Samuel, always serene, thanked him as if nothing had happened. "Thank you," Marta replied, looking directly into Felipe's eyes, which quickly shifted away. When dessert arrived, Felipe's behavior worsened. He slammed the plates on the table with a sudden movement, almost tipping over the ice cream. "Hope you enjoy it. It's a house specialty." Marta sighed but kept her composure. She and Samuel exchanged silent glances, as if deciding what to do. When Felipe finally returned to deliver the bill, Marta raised her hand. "We would like to speak to the manager, please." Felipe smiled, a smile of challenge. "Sure. But I'll say this up front. Everything was done according to the restaurant standards. If there is a problem, it's probably a misunderstanding." "No?" Marta and Samuel exchanged a glance but decided not to insist. They got up, and Marta left a folded note on the table before leaving. Felipe picked up the paper, curious. Upon opening it, he found only one sentence. "People are not always what they seem. See you soon." He chuckled softly, crumpled the note, and tossed it in the trash, unaware that something had changed that night. However, as he looked out the window and saw the couple getting into a luxurious car he hadn't noticed before, a doubt began to form in his mind. Who were Marta and Samuel? Why did the note feel more like a promise than a warning? Felipe felt for the first time that something was out of his control, but he still didn't know how devastating the consequences of his actions that night would be. Felipe entered the restaurant the next morning with his usual confidence. The dining room was quiet, still empty before the first customers arrived. He adjusted his apron and checked his schedule for the day, ignoring the discomfort he felt remembering the note left by the couple the night before. As he was setting the tables, Roberto, the restaurant manager, rushed in, holding his phone. His expression was tense, a stark contrast to the relaxed demeanor he usually displayed. "Felipe, we need to talk now." Felipe raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Sure. What happened? Roberto didn't respond immediately. He walked to one of the tables, pulled out a chair, and gestured for Felipe to do the same. The waiter complied, a bit suspicious. Do you remember the couple you served last night, Marta and Samuel? Felipe shrugged. Yeah. Why? I didn't do anything wrong if that's what you're thinking. Dina, Gamna, An you, Rimomad, Diansiobo, Canintor, Dingoinzaustrikan. Roberto placed the phone on the table and pushed it toward Felipe. On the screen was a social media post. It was a photo of the restaurant, accompanied by a detailed account of the terrible experience Marta and Samuel had. The account was straightforward, mentioning not only the behavior of the waiter, but also the discriminatory tone with which they were treated. We were treated as if we didn't belong in this space. The service was deliberately poor, and the feeling of humiliation was constant. This restaurant may have stars in its name, but it lacks humanity. This needs to change. The post had thousands of likes, shares, and comments. Some people recounted similar experiences at the restaurant, while others expressed outrage. Felipe felt his stomach twist but tried to hide it. This is an exaggeration. They're just trying to get attention. Customers like that are always looking for problems. Roberto didn't seem convinced. Do you really think this is just a misunderstanding, Felipe? Do you know who they are? Felipe shook his head. Oh no. 2 annoying customers. That's all. Roberto took a deep breath, clearly frustrated. Samuel is one of the biggest investors in the group that owns this restaurant. And Marta? Well, she is a renowned lawyer, known for fighting against discrimination and inequality. They are not annoying customers, Felipe. They are people with enough power and influence to destroy not only this restaurant, but also your career. The words hit Felipe like a punch. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. His usual confidence began to waver. That can't be true, he murmured. Believe it, Roberto replied, crossing his arms. I received a call from the group's head this morning. They are demanding an urgent meeting. And if you think you're going to get away with this, you better rethink. In the owner's group office, the meeting happened hours later. Felipe, still processing what had happened, sat in a luxurious conference room with Roberto by his side. Across the table sat Samuel and Marta. Both exuded a chilling calmness, but there was something in their eyes that made it clear they weren't there to be ignored. Felipe tried to look away but felt the weight of their presence. Roberto began to speak, trying to appease the situation. First of all, I want to apologize on behalf of the restaurant. This incident does not reflect the values of our establishment. Marta interrupted, her voice calm but firm. We are not here just for an apology, Mr. Roberto. We are here because this behavior cannot continue. This is not an isolated case. Samuel leaned slightly forward, looking directly at Felipe. You underestimated us, Felipe. Not just as customers, but as people. And your attitude was not merely a failure of professionalism. It was a reflection of something much bigger. Something we are determined to change. Felipe swallowed hard but tried to defend himself. I didn't mean to offend anyone. It was just a bad night. Marta let out a short, humorless laugh. A bad night. You intentionally humiliated us, thinking you could get away with it. But now you know who we are. And you know we won't let this slide. Later, back at the restaurant, Felipe returned to work with a weight in his chest. He knew his position was at risk but still struggled to accept the gravity of what he had done. As he arranged the tables, he began to hear his colleagues whispering. The story of the incident had already spread, and he felt the judging stares. In the kitchen, one of his colleagues, Anna, confronted him. What were you thinking, Felipe? Why did you treat those people like that? I don't know, he replied, exasperated. I thought they were nobody important. Anna shook her head, disappointed. That's the problem. You shouldn't treat anyone like that, important or not. It's about respect. No status. Nani? Anna's words echoed in Felipe's mind as he finished his shift. For the first time, he began to wonder if there was more to the world than his own arrogance. Felipe was restless. The weight of his colleagues' gazes in the restaurant had turned into an unbearable silence. Even without anyone speaking directly, he knew they were all talking about him behind his back. The incident with Marta and Samuel had put the restaurant at the center of a storm, and Felipe was in the eye of the hurricane. While clearing tables after lunch, he saw Roberto emerge from the office with a troubled expression. The manager stopped in front of Felipe, crossing his arms. They're not going to let this go. Felipe. Nah. Felipe looked at him, confused. What do you mean by that? Roberto sighed and sat down in a nearby chair. I got another call from Samuel. They are going to file a formal complaint against the restaurant. But that's not all. Marta is leading an investigation to expose discriminatory practices in other establishments of the chain. And you are at the center of it all. Main. Felipe felt his blood run cold. But they are overreacting. It was just one bad night. I'm not like that. Roberto shook his head, frustrated. Maybe you should have thought about that before acting that way. Now, what's at stake is not just your reputation. It's the future of the entire restaurant. Meanwhile, in an office downtown, Marta and Samuel were gathered with a team of lawyers and activists. The atmosphere was serious yet determined. Marta was reviewing the reports that had started coming in since the case went viral on social media. Here's another complaint, said one of the lawyers, placing a file on the table. A couple reported being ignored at another restaurant in the same chain. The pattern is always the same. Black customers or those who appear humble being treated as inferior. Samuel rubbed his chin, deep in thought. This is bigger than we thought. It's not just about a waiter's behavior. It's about an entire culture that allows this kind of attitude. Marta nodded. And that's why we can't stop. The incident with Felipe was just the tip of the iceberg. Let's use this as a catalyst to expose everything. Back at the restaurant, Felipe tried to carry on with his day normally, but he was interrupted by Anna, the colleague who had confronted him before. She pulled him aside in the kitchen where no one could hear them. You know you're not going to get out of this easily, right? Felipe scoffed, exasperated. Anna, I've already understood. I made a mistake, but they are turning this into something much bigger than it was. Anna crossed her arms, shaking her head. Bigger than it was? Felipe, you don't realize what you did. Marta and Samuel are not wrong. This place has problems that go far beyond you, but you were the trigger. They finally have something concrete to attack, and you gave it to them on a silver platter. Felipe tried to respond, to argue, but Anna's words hit him like a punch. For the first time, he began to see that the problem was not just him, it was the entire system that allowed attitudes like his to be normalized. A few days later, Marta and Samuel called a press conference to detail the actions they were taking. The restaurant, now in the spotlight, saw its clientele drop drastically. The presence of cameras and journalists outside the establishment was constant. Felipe watched the conference from home, unable to take his eyes off the screen. Marta spoke with impressive clarity, each word laden with purpose. This is not just an isolated case. It is a reflection of a systemic problem that affects many others. What happened to us is what happens to thousands of people every day, but this time we decided not to remain silent. Samuel added, We are not seeking justice just for ourselves. We want to ensure that no one else goes through what we went through. And that starts with accountability, but also with change. Felipe turned off the television, but the words echoed in his mind. He knew he needed to do something, but he didn't know where to start. The next day, Felipe was called to Roberto's office again. When he entered, he found not only the manager but also a legal representative of the restaurant. The atmosphere was heavy. Felipe, we need your cooperation, the representative started formally. We know there is an ongoing investigation, and your conduct is central to it. We want to know if you're willing to help clarify the facts. Felipe looked at them, feeling the weight of guilt. What do you expect me to say? The truth, Roberto replied sharply. You know how things work here. You know this culture of discrimination didn't start with you. But if you cooperate, we can mitigate the impact of this for everyone. Nine. Felipe hesitated. He knew that exposing the restaurant's internal practices would mean betraying the place he had worked for years. But he also knew that staying silent would be worse. I will help, he finally said, his voice low but firm. I need to correct what I did. That night, Felipe found Ana at the restaurant's exit. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. So, you finally decided to do the right thing? Felipe nodded. I can't change what happened, but I can try to do something better now. 19. Ana smiled faintly. So start now, Felipe. Because this is far from over. Felipe left Roberto's office feeling a weight on his shoulders. For the first time, he admitted that there was a bigger problem than his arrogance and misconduct. He knew that the system he had served for so long allowed attitudes like his, and that if he wanted to fix things, he needed to expose uncomfortable truths. That, sitting in his small apartment, Felipe began to mentally list everything. What he knew about the restaurant's practices, from poorly conducted training sessions to the informal standards that encouraged employees to prioritize certain types of customers. He knew that what he had was enough to bolster Marta and Samuel's investigation. But he also understood that this decision could mark the end of his career. Meanwhile, in an office downtown, Marta and Samuel were finalizing preparations for a new phase of the investigation. The case had gained more media attention, and more people began sharing their stories of discrimination at the chain's restaurants. We have enough testimonies to prove this wasn't an isolated incident, Marta said, analyzing a dossier. But we still need something from the inside. Something that shows this culture was deliberately encouraged. Nine. Samuel nodded. Do you think Felipe would cooperate? He seemed resistant, but the pressure is increasing. Maybe he'll realize that speaking up is the only way out. Marta was silent for a moment before responding. If he truly wants to change, he'll have to show it through actions, not just words. The next day, at the restaurant, Felipe called Roberto for a private conversation. They met in the meeting room, away from the curious eyes of the other employees. Roberto looked impatient but attentive. What's it about now, Felipe? Felipe took a deep breath before answering. I want to help. I know I've been part of the problem, but I want to make it right. I know what's wrong here, and I can provide information for the investigation. Roberto crossed his arms, evaluating him. Are you sure about this? If you do this, there's no going back. You're going to put your name on something that could take down this restaurant. Nah. I know, Felipe replied. But honestly, I think it's about time this happens. Later that day, Felipe was summoned to a meeting with Marta and Samuel. He entered the room nervous but determined. Marta was seated at the head of the table, while Samuel watched him closely. Why did you decide to speak now? Marta asked bluntly. Felipe hesitated for a moment before answering. Because I realized what I did was wrong. Not just that night, but throughout all the years I worked here. I followed a system that treated people unfairly, and I took advantage of that. I'm here to try to make it right. Marta and Samuel exchanged glances before Marta spoke again. All right, Felipe. But we need more than words. We need concrete facts. What do you know? Felipe began to speak, revealing everything he knew about the restaurant's internal practices. He mentioned the superficial training sessions, where employees were instructed to prioritize clients who reflected the house's standard. He talked about the subtle yet constant comments that reinforced prejudices among colleagues. He also mentioned the CA instances where managers ignored or even encouraged discriminatory behaviors. All of this was treated as something normal, Felipe said, his voice low. I thought I was just following the rules, but now I see I was being complicit. What I? Marta listened carefully, jotting down every detail. When Felipe finished, she looked him straight in the eye. Thank you for sharing this. But know that your actions still have consequences. What you did that night won't be erased by you being here today. Nian. Felipe nodded, accepting the words. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want to help put an end to this. Dian. Danimo, anamon says Yareveka, Casedo, Anikriyashistans. A few days later, the investigation took a new direction. With the information provided by Felipe, Marta and Samuel managed to connect the discriminatory behaviors to internal policies implemented by the network's management. Testimonies from other employees corroborated the claims, and the internal documents Felipe provided were the final piece Marta needed. The news exploded in the media. Luxury restaurant chain accused of encouraging systemic discrimination. The impact was immediate. Customers began to boycott the establishments, and investors demanded answers. The group's headquarters was surrounded by protesters, and the owner of the chain, Henrique Moreira, was finally forced to speak out publicly. We are deeply disappointed by the accusations and are conducting an internal investigation to ensure that such practices never happen again. But Henrique's words felt empty. Marta and Samuel knew he was only trying to protect his image. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Felipe faced the consequences of his decision. Some colleagues avoided him, while others saw him as someone trying to correct his wrongs. Ana, who always confronted him, was one of the first to approach. I heard what you did, she said. It was brave, but it was also the bare minimum you could do. Felipe nodded, accepting the criticism. I didn't do it to be praised. I did it because it was the right thing. No, and Simon, Anna smiled faintly. Then keep doing the right thing. You still have a lot to prove. In court, the evidence presented against the restaurant was sufficient to open a formal lawsuit. Marta and Samuel led the case, with Felipe testifying as a crucial part of the prosecution. His statement was honest and direct, admitting his mistakes and exposing the restaurant's systemic flaws. The trial was broadcast live, and millions watched as the restaurant was condemned to pay a hefty fine and implement strict inclusion and diversity policies. Months later, the restaurant underwent a complete transformation. Under new management, with new staff and a new code of conduct, it began to rebuild its reputation. Felipe, despite losing his job, found purpose working on social projects that promoted equality. Ta and Samuel, satisfied with the impact they made, continued their fight against discrimination in other sectors. For them, that victory was just the beginning. The days following the trial were intense. The restaurant where Felipe worked became the center of an unexpected revolution. Under new management, changes started to be implemented rapidly, new training programs, a renewed team, and a public commitment to inclusion and respect. The case of Marta and Samuel not only exposed discriminatory practices, but also paved the way for broader change in the industry. For Felipe, the impact was more personal. He had lost his job after testifying against the restaurant. But for the first time, he felt he had done something right. Working alongside Marta and Samuel during the process helped him see the world through a different lens. Now, he was determined to turn his mistakes into a new mission. One day, while organizing documents he had received from a local NGO, his phone rang. It was Anna, his former co-worker. Felipe, I heard you're helping with social projects now. Yes, he replied, somewhat hesitantly. It's my way of trying to make things right. Anna paused before continuing. That's great. I know things have been tough for you, but I see that you're trying to change. That matters. Is she honest? Anna's words, simple yet sincere, were the encouragement Felipe needed. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he was determined to build a better future. Meanwhile, Marta and Samuel were celebrating the changes. The restaurant chain was ordered to pay a multi-million-dollar settlement, which would be directed towards initiatives combating discrimination and supporting small businesses in underrepresented communities. Marta, ever strategic, decided to invest part of the fund into educational programs aimed at training staff in the service sector. "This victory isn't just ours," Marta said in an interview. "It belongs to everyone who has suffered discrimination but didn't have a voice. And it's also a reminder that change is possible when we fight for what's right." Samuel, for his part, used his influence to ensure that other restaurant chains adopted similar policies. He knew the impact of this case could extend beyond a single establishment. In the renovated restaurant, the transformation was evident. New employees were hired, and the atmosphere felt more welcoming. Anna, who had decided to stay with the team, watched with satisfaction as changes unfolded. "Now it really feels like the place I always wanted to work," she told one of the new managers. The new team was diverse, and the training emphasized respect and equality as fundamental pillars of service. For the first time in years, the restaurant seemed to have regained its soul. Felipe decided to visit Marta and Samuel in person. He had written a letter, but he felt he needed to talk to them face to face. When he arrived at the office where they worked, he was greeted by Marta, who looked at him with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Felipe, what brings you here?" He took a deep breath before responding. "I wanted to thank you for showing me I was wrong and for giving me the chance to help, even after everything I've done." Marta crossed her arms, assessing him carefully. "You made the right choice in the end, Felipe. But know that this change is a continuous process. It's not just about a moment, but about who you decide to be from now on." Samuel walked into the room at that moment, observing the interaction. Felipe looked at him and continued. "I know that. I can't erase what I did, but I want to use my experience to help others not make the same mistakes." Samuel gave a slight smile. "We all have the power to change, Felipe. The real question is, what will you do with this opportunity?" Felipe left the office feeling lighter. He knew he still had a long way to go, but he also knew he was on the right path. A few weeks later, Marta and Samuel were invited to a special inauguration at the renovated restaurant. The new management wanted to show that the changes were not just superficial. When they arrived, they were greeted with impeccable service and a warm welcome. Anna, now one of the team leaders, was the one who attended to them. "It's an honor to have you here again. I hope you can see the changes you helped inspire." Marta and Samuel observed the environment attentively. There was a different energy in the place, a sense of respect and hospitality that had been lacking before. Final scene. Marta and Samuel, sitting at a table near the window, toasted with glasses of wine. The sun was setting outside, casting a golden light over the restaurant. "We did it, Samuel. Things have really changed." Samuel smiled, holding her hand. "They changed because we refused to accept less than what we deserved. And now, other people won't have to either." As they toasted, the camera focused on the activity in the restaurant. Customers from all backgrounds being served with respect and care. The soft music in the background filled the space, marking the beginning of a new chapter for everyone. Marta and Samuel not only exposed a problem, but helped build a lasting solution. Felipe, after facing his flaws, found a new purpose, becoming an advocate for inclusion. The restaurant, once a symbol of exclusion, became a model of change and respect. With an ending full of hope and transformation, the story serves as a reminder that even the greatest mistakes can become the start of something better when faced with courage and determination. The end.